The doors of Blackmere opened for us almost the moment the car stopped beneath the portico, for I suspected the household had grown just as weary of Grace's absence as I had these last 2 days, for the place never seemed right when she was not within it. A footman hurried forward for her case while the nurse gathered the rest of the child's things from beside her in the back seat. The sun fell sharply across the carrier between Grace and me as the car door opened, and I shifted it away so the light wouldn't reach my boy's face. I carried him through the hall with Grace upon my arm beside me. Though no law in England would ever name me Earl of this land, I don't believe any king alive could have felt half so proud in that moment as I did returning to Blackmere with my wife on one side and my son on the other. The carrier barely touched the centre table before I reached for him again. I hadn't expected fatherhood to feel quite so physical in its devotion, nor understood before now how quickly a man might ache for the return of his child the instant he no longer held him. So I slipped my hands beneath him and lifted him against my chest before the footman could take my coat from me, falling to the floor instead. Langsley motioned down the hall as the servants moved to gather our things from the entrance behind us. The Earl and Princess Mary are waiting in the dining room, sir. Though he was some years younger than I was myself, there was something distinctly grandfatherly in his expression when he looked upon our boy. That is a right handsome child, if you do not mind my saying so, sir. I didn't trouble myself to be modest about it. There was something deeply satisfying in knowing that this boy, my boy, would one day be master of all of this, that the Rowen line would continue through him, and that Blackmere itself would pass into hands I'd helped to make. He is that, I said, and a good boy besides. He scarcely cries at all. He kept close beside Grace as we moved, his hand hovering near her elbow each time she slowed even slightly. Childbirth had exhausted her more than she wished anyone to notice, though I doubted another soul alive would have thought her anything but lovely all the same. Then again, I'd long since lost any ability to look upon Grace with fairness where such matters were concerned, and watching her with our son these last days had only worsened the condition, I'm afraid. She took to caring for the boy with such ease that one would think she'd been born already knowing him. We reached the dining room, and I found myself gripping my son a little tighter beneath the pressure building in my chest. Becoming warden of Blackmere had felt much like any other position I'd ever held. More responsibility, more scrutiny, more work waiting on my desk each morning. An honour, certainly, but still only a title in the end. This was something else entirely, because the old man waiting beyond that door did not care half so much about titles as he did about the child in my arms. I realized that bringing him this boy and his mother home alive and well might be the greatest thing I would accomplish in all my years upon this earth. Langsley opened the door and stepped aside to allow us through. Edmund and his wife were already at the table when we entered, their luncheon left untouched. The room had been overtaken by flowers, cards and parcels, with enough silver rattles and embroidered blankets between them to stock a nursery twice over. Moving immediately to the sideboard, Langsley lifted the cover from the cake while a footman took up the champagne beside it. Grace went to her grandmother first. Mary caught one of her hands the moment she bent to kiss her cheek and held it, turning her face as though to see Grace better in the light from the windows. "Oh, Gracie," she said, "you look wonderful." "Thank you," Grace said, and bent further to put both arms around her from behind. "You are looking lovely today as well. You have turned the entire house into a florist's shop these last days," Edmund told her when she came around to embrace him next. "It appears half of England thought to congratulate us." The child in my arms had already become the single greatest treasure ever placed into my keeping, paired with his mother, of course. And I confess I had developed little enthusiasm these last days for surrendering him to anyone else but Grace. But watching Edmund look towards him, I understood I was not merely presenting him with an heir. I was returning something to him that he believed was lost forever. So when Grace moved towards the chair Langsley held for her, I brought my son nearer to the Earl at last. "My lord," I said, and lowered my sweet boy into Edmund's waiting arms. "Allow me to present your great-grandson, George Edmund Rowen Ashcombe." "Oh." He breathed and did not speak again for a long moment, his head tilting as he studied our baby more closely. A finger moved through the pale streak set against the child's dark hair, just right of the widow's peak, like the rest of them. "It seems George Rowen will be Earl of Blackmere after all." Until that moment, I don't believe I fully understood what Edmund had endured all these years after his son's death. I understood the loss in theory, of course. I had watched what remained of the family afterward, and the house itself that seemed to hollow around the absence of its heir. But understanding a thing intellectually and imagining my own son taken from me proved two entirely different agonies. The mere thought of it nearly undid me. So I looked away a moment beneath the sting beginning in my eyes before I trusted myself to speak again. Then I laid a hand against Edmund's shoulder as I passed him for my seat beside Grace, the old man still wholly absorbed in the child sleeping within his arms. "As it should be," I said. Langsley began setting the cake before us while champagne was poured around the table, though I noticed little of either beyond the child still sleeping peacefully across from me. Beneath the tablecloth, Grace touched my hand, and when I looked towards her, I found her watching me with the sort of expression that told me she understood perfectly well what handing the boy over had cost me. Not because I distrusted Edmund with him, nor because I regretted it, but because every selfish instinct in me wanted my son back in my own arms already. Still, I could not begrudge Edmund anything. Truthfully, if our positions had been reversed, if my George Edmund had been taken from me before his time while some future grandson carried his name back into this room at last, I should have prayed for precisely this same mercy myself. So I turned my hand beneath hers and put a kiss to her knuckles, resigning myself, for the moment at least, to Edmund and Mary, having their turn with my son, while Grace and I saw to the champagne and birthday cake.